Good afternoon, Ambassador. Thank you for having us at the Arab Gulf State Institute. I would like to talk to you about a few things today to
Sure.
understand about your background, service, and the Institute as well.
Okay.
Uh, so if you can please tell us about your upbringing and background as an Arab American first.
Okay, sure. And thank you, and welcome to you and to the readers of the magazine, to the Arab Gulf States Institute. My background goes quite a ways back. My parents first came to the United States when my father was a Fulbright scholar, and the whole family came with him, and we spent 3 years in the U.S. And after that, we went back to Egypt, and then we immigrated from Egypt in the late 1960s. So I spent more of my life in the US than I have in the Middle East. But of course, after joining the State Department and spent 22 years of my foreign service career back in the Middle East, so I feel that the years, if I counted them, are probably equal between my life here and in the Middle East. So I consider myself very much a bridge between the two cultures. And whenever I go back to Egypt, of course, it's like going home, but the home is certainly here in the U.S. So I have been fortunate that I had the opportunity to work in government service, and especially at the Department of State, where I think more Arab Americans should be hoping in the future to see more Arab Americans at the Department of State and other foreign service institutions, because again, I think the more we have Arab Americans in the foreign policy world, I think the more we can do to bridge the differences between the region and the United States.
I see. Well, that's a very interesting background. How do you feel that your background as Arab American contributed to you being an ambassador or being in the State Department?
Oh, very much, of course. I think once I joined the State Department and I was assigned to the Middle East, I quickly found that the knowledge of the region, the heritage that I had in common with the region, the language, and the familiarity and understanding the texture of the society, I think made me more effective in my position. It certainly strengthened my ability to reach out to people from all sectors of society. I think when they met me, I hope they found a diplomat that was interested in promoting the United States, but also interested in very much reflecting their perspective and their points of view back to Washington, so that we would hopefully contribute to a better understanding. Certainly in the years that I spent in the Middle East, there, I can say, rising tensions. There were times of conflict during the first war in Iraq and then the second one. So it is not easy in many ways to be serving in a region where so much conflict is going on, but you can also contribute more. And I think my background as an Arab American who had a better understanding of the culture, hopefully, and the language, and just an instinct for how to bridge those divides between us and many people in the region on policy issues, which there were many divides, I would say. I think my background helped me a great deal. And I certainly think of it that way. And I think many people I met agreed that having an Arab American in a senior position in embassies was important for them and also for their country and for our country here in the U.S.
So being a woman ambassador in the Gulf region back at that time, was it an advantage or a disadvantage, you believe?
Well, it certainly was not a disadvantage. I mean, maybe some people were worried about it because I was the first woman ambassador to the United Arab Emirates. But when I arrived at the United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi, I did not feel that it was in any way a hindrance or a handicap. Actually, I would say it was more of a positive, because I think I had the ability and the opportunity and access to a lot of the women in the UAE, especially those who are members of the ruling family and do not necessarily are not easily accessible to the public. And so I think I built relationships with both, obviously the leadership, for all the men in the leadership hierarchy, but I also got to know the women. And I think actually this was a huge plus because the women play a very significant role, as you probably know.
Great, and yes, obviously it is an advantage. And United Arab Emirates is one of the countries in the region that opened up early, actually,
Yes.
for women, education, business, and other arenas. From the cultural perspective, you came from Egyptian / North African culture. How was that? Was it so different from the Gulf region? Did you feel a lot of differences? Did you have to adjust?
Well, it is different. I mean, we're all, we speak the same language and there are a lot of commonalities, but there are differences between Egypt and the Gulf, between the Levant, I served in Jordan as well and spent a lot of time in Syria. So there are big differences. I mean, the Gulf is more maybe conservative societies in some ways, although I was fortunate being in Abu Dhabi. I think it's one of the most open societies in the Gulf region. They enjoy, a population that has representatives from over 200 countries. So it's really a multinational country. You meet almost every citizen you can imagine, and all living in very good terms in terms of getting along and being harmonious. And the level of tolerance for differences is, I think, great in the UAE. It's one of the things I appreciated the most. But there are differences, and I enjoyed learning about them. I mean, the Majlis culture, for example, doesn't exist in Egypt or in Syria or in Jordan very much. So that was a new one for me. Also, their connection to the desert is much stronger. Even in their diet and the way they appreciate dates and when the dates come out, and the weekend times they spend out in the desert, especially in the winter. I enjoyed that very much. I learned a lot, and I found it very beautiful. Yeah.
How about the food? Was it a lot different for you? Did you have to acquire or adjust to that, or?
No, you don't really have to adjust. I mean, now in the Middle East, wherever you go, the food is very similar. It has Turkish and Persian and Lebanese and Egyptian strands. But the traditional, those were different. I had not tried them before, and I enjoyed tasting them. But you don't get a chance to see too much of or to experience that very much unless you go to a home of an Emirati national, because when you go to restaurants, it's mainly the usual Middle East. Although now they've come up more recently, now that I've gone back to Abu Dhabi and Dubai, I've noticed that they now have some specific local restaurants that feature Emirati dishes, which was not there when I served. But now they're becoming more proud of it. It's a sense of identity, and I think they're promoting that. So it's fun to see that.
Great. Now, from the other side of the equation, the State Department, being an Arab American ambassador and a diplomat, how much did that help you build the bridge between the Gulf region or the Middle East and the State Department and U.S.?
I think a lot. I think it did a lot. I think people at the Department of State appreciated my role, my performance in these countries, whether it was in Egypt and Jordan or in the UAE. I think they saw that I had I think a very close understanding of those political, social issues that were important for us as diplomats to understand. I think my language skills helped a lot bridge some of the issues that we were handling. So I think there was an appreciation of the State Department. I had a terrific career at the Department of State. I really, from the day I joined, my performance was appreciated. I got promoted. I was then, much to my surprise, because I was not in the political cone, I was in the public diplomacy cone. I was then recommended for a chief of mission position. So I'm very, very happy with the way my career went at the Department of State, and I'm very grateful for the people that I worked with. I have many people to thank for mentoring me through my years in the Foreign Service.